I was raised in hallways that smelled like lemon polish and coffee grounds where a bell at the front desk rang like a metronome for our family's heartbeat. Chicago Paradise Inn sat on a busy corner not far from the river, 50 rooms and a dining room that tried to be more than it was. My childhood was laundry carts and folded towels and the soft scrape of keycards against doors. On Saturdays, my father would count the register at the bar while my brother Patrick spun a stool and listened to plans that never included me. I learned early that the person who keeps the ledger rarely gets a standing ovation, but the lights do not come on unless someone pays the bill. Back then, I believed if I worked twice as hard and spoke half as much, I could earn my way into the conversation. That belief lasted until the night my father toasted to the next generation and only made eye contact with Patrick. I left for New York after graduation in the year 2011, the summer heat draping over the city like a wet blanket. I had a degree from Cornell's School of Hospitality and a promise I would keep my head down and learn everything. I got a job on Park Avenue as an assistant who knew where the extra linens were stored and how to calm a guest who had been awake for too long. I signed not one but 3 non-compete agreements because I was ambitious and naive and thought contracts were a test of discipline, not a weapon of delay. When the general manager called me ruthlessly competent with a smile that was not a compliment, I took the insult and turned it into a checklist. Room inspections, vendor audits, union schedules, fire code drills, I did them all, and I did them without asking for applause. The bills from home arrived like winter. In late January of the year 2012, I picked up a phone call from my mother that sounded like wind over a microphone. Payroll was due and a snowstorm had kept guests away. I transferred 2 weeks of my own pay with a note that said, "Temporary bridge." My father never mentioned the money, but I saw it in the bank reconciliation he emailed to vendors by mistake. A month later, there was a boiler repair and a shortfall, and I sent another transfer because I could not stand the idea of Lily from the front desk missing her rent. The third time I covered a gap, I wrote the amount on an index card and slid it into a book of children's stories I still kept from the lobby reading hours I used to host. I told myself it was not charity, it was investment. That word would matter later, but we are not there yet. Olivia, my best friend from school and the only person who understood how loyalty can feel like a mortgage, called me most nights to ask if I had eaten real food. She was a balm and a mirror reminding me I did not have to become small to be taken seriously. "You are building something," she would say. "It does not have to be loud yet." She came to visit and slept in my tiny studio where a radiator hissed like a cat, and we wrote out a 5-year plan on butcher paper taped to the wall. The plan was simple: learn systems, learn people, save cash, and when the opportunity came, buy something everyone else had given up on. We circled the phrase distressed assets and underlined quiet ownership. It felt like treason to put it in ink, but truth looks like treason to people who expect you to be grateful for crumbs. Patrick, meanwhile, stayed in Chicago. He had charm that slicked over mistakes like butter in a hot pan. I am not being cruel, that is simply his talent. He could talk down a delivery delay with a wink and talk up a local reporter with the same wink, and my father loved the sound of his voice in a lobby. When Patrick called, it was often to ask if I could look into something like vendor disputes or insurance language. He framed me as the reliable one, the spreadsheet, the fixer. He framed himself as the face of the brand. If you have ever been the responsible one in a family business, you know the script, you keep the receipts, they keep the room keys. I mailed home holiday gifts for the staff, handwritten cards with bonuses tucked inside from my savings. My mother called me thoughtful, my father called me practical. Patrick called me sis, which in his mouth sometimes meant assistant. There was a memory that would not leave me alone, a snapshot from a 4th of July when I was 14, fireworks spearing the sky while my father did the nightly count. A cash drawer ran short. Patrick shrugged, said, "I must have miscounted." I watched him place his hand over the ledger the way a magician covers a coin. The shortage went down in the book next to my name. I took the blemish as a lesson in vigilance. Years later, that memory pricked my skin whenever numbers did not line up. And numbers were not lining up. Marcus, a certified public accountant I had met at a grim conference about post-recession debt, took a quiet look at Chicago Paradise Inn's ratios when I asked him as a friend. He spoke in careful sentences and said cash flow was breathing through a straw. He also said the bank's covenant tests were not going to be met if winter came hard again. I asked him for dates. He gave me 3: a missed payment in early December, another in mid-January, and a technical breach on Valentine's Day. He did not dramatize. He did not need to. I had choices, and none of them were noble in the way children's stories like to be. I could keep sending money into a pit and hope my family would see me as more than a lifeline. Or I could prepare for the day when the bank would decide it had run out of patience. I started reading about limited liability companies and special purpose vehicles late at night when the building went quiet and the radiator spit water at the air. I cooked lentils and made coffee too strong and highlighted sentences about due diligence like other people highlight scripture. On my desk, next to a dried magnolia leaf I carried from home, I kept a copy of my grandfather's union card as a reminder that security is not a favor. It is negotiated in writing. If you are waiting for the first real crack, it came in an email my father forwarded without reading. A vendor asked for payment and attached the hotel's latest accounts receivable aging report. It had columns that told the truth even when people did not current 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. There were too many numbers in the wrong columns. I answered the email with a polite promise to look into it, and then I opened a new document and titled it simply Plan. The word tasted like courage and betrayal at the same time. I will tell you what went into that plan soon, because it is the spine of everything that follows. For now, know this, I was done being a secret benefactor. I was going to become an owner they did not see coming. The night my father decided to make it official arrived with the smell of grilled meat and that stubborn Chicago wind pressing against the windows like a hand. We were at a long table in the hotel restaurant, the one we pretended was upscale because the napkins were folded like sailboats. There were 5 kinds of mustard lined up beside the steaks, Dijon whole grain honey spicy, and one that tasted like a dare. The city's tourism rep was there, a columnist from a local paper, and a handful of vendors who had extended us kindness on credit. My mother poured water with the concentration of someone carrying porcelain across ice. Patrick told a story loud enough to claim the room, the kind with a punchline that landed on my expense. When the desserts arrived, my father stood and clinked a glass. To the next generation, he said, eyes shining toward Patrick. Effective immediately, Patrick will serve as acting general manager. There it was announced like weather. My name did not travel through the air that night. I took a breath, made it smaller, and let it sit in my chest until the ache dulled. Hospitality teaches you how to swallow. Family teaches you how to make a meal out of it. Patrick leaned toward me afterward with a smile that wanted to be brotherly and failed. Sis, he said, hanging on the word, you are magic with spreadsheets. I need you exactly there. Do not worry about the spotlight. It is heavy. The columnist laughed. The tourism rep nodded like politics had just happened, which to be fair it had. My father squeezed Patrick's shoulder and told him he had charisma, the thing you cannot teach. He did not say what he thought I had. Later, as I cleared the edge of a place setting that had caught a smear of mustard, I felt the smallness try to bloom into rage. I refused it. I chose inventory. I chose patience. Quiet is a strategy if you aim it. The next morning, Marcus called. He does not dramatize. He unspools facts like thread until you see the length for yourself. He had reviewed the hotel's latest financials as a favor, the kind of favor you record in your mind with interest. Cash flow is constricted, he said. Debt service coverage is below 1. Interest reserve is basically air. He paused kind and then added, there were 3 consecutive late payments, early December, mid-January, and a technical breach dated Valentine's Day. He spoke the dates like a doctor speaks numbers in a diagnosis, clear, humane, undeniable. I stood at my window and watched a delivery truck reverse into an alley, its beeping folded into the city's own metronome. Are you sure? I asked. He said he had the covenant certificate the bank required and that the math was not a debate. I thanked him. Then I wrote the words, no more rescues on a sticky note, and pressed it to the edge of my mirror where it would catch my eye at inconvenient times. At the hotel, I asked Lily if she could pull the prior month's keycard report and the housekeeping logs. She looked worried. No one likes audits unless they are the auditor, and I told her the truth. I am checking our rhythm. The numbers had an offbeat. The occupancy in the system did not dance with the linen counts. The server closet door was propped open with a catalog that had not been current for years. A sticky note with a password sat on the edge of a monitor like a dare. I did not accuse anyone of anything. I wrote down the timestamp and the name of the person who had used a master key after midnight. Then I folded the paper and slid it into my pocket the way I had slid index cards with transferred amounts into an old storybook. Evidence is a habit before it is a folder. I tried to talk to my father in the language he spoke, operations dressed as pride. We need a capital plan, I said in the office that had smelled like pencil shavings when I was a child. We need to phase renovation to meet fire code updates and Americans with Disabilities Act compliance. And we need a vendor payment schedule that can withstand a bad winter. He waved a hand like he was brushing off dust. You worry like an accountant, he said. Guests come for charm. Your brother has charm. He added more softly, but no less sharp. Not everyone is born to lead from the front. There was a time those words would have sent me sprinting for the proving ground. This time they sent me to the printer. I made 2 copies of the bank's letter reminding the hotel of its reporting obligations and tucked one into a folder labeled Weather. Because my father read anything with that word. Patrick held quick meetings that felt like pep rallies. He ordered new uniforms that photographed well and pushed a social media campaign full of adjectives. We need to look expensive, he said, then the revenue will catch up. He suggested we switch coffee vendors because the current one did not vibe with his brand. I suggested we pay the current one because his invoices were at 90 days. He rolled his eyes. Details, Deb. That is your kingdom. He called me Ms. Spreadsheet once in front of a shift full of housekeepers, and his grin told me he thought the meanness was invisible if you made it cute. The room laughed to keep the peace. I wrote down the phrase anyway. Cruelty hides in nicknames and budgets. Put it on paper, and it loses camouflage. Marcus sent me a note. The bank wants a plan by April 3rd. The date felt like a pin pushed into a map. I started sketching models at night, what it would cost to shore up systems, how many rooms we could take offline, and still survive what a renovation schedule could look like if we staged it like theater. I loved the problem even as I hated the reasons we had it. Olivia came over with takeout and a whiteboard and made me present. Make the case like they do not love you, she said. Because they love their ideas more. I built a presentation a stranger could respect. Then I returned to my father and delivered it with calm. I earned the hard way. He nodded at the pretty charts, then told Patrick to order the uniforms in a deeper blue. That night, I walked through the lobby after close and stood under a light that flickered slightly because the ballast wanted replacing and no one had approved it. I could name every chipped tile, every seam trying to come undone. I could also see the hotel it wanted to be if anyone would stop confusing vibe with solvency. I was the responsible one, the boring one, the one who measured twice and cut once, even when the room demanded confetti. If you have ever been told your steadiness is a flaw, you know the heat that rises when chaos calls itself leadership. I pressed my palm to the front desk, felt the cool laminate under my skin, and made a promise to the building itself. Not to the men who had misnamed me, not to the headlines that wanted sparkle. To the building, I would save it. Not loudly, not with a show. I would save it in the language it understood, line items and schedules and the click of a keycard that worked when a guest needed sleep. What they did not know, what they could not imagine because they had never seen me as anything but a shadow that held up their light, was that the bank's deadline would become my door. I would walk through it with documents they would dismiss as paperwork until the signatures made a new reality. That April letter would matter. The mustard would become a memory, and the word acting in Patrick's title would prove to be prophetic. But we are not there yet. For now, write down the date Thursday, November 24th, 2022. And the phrase my father used that night, charisma you cannot teach. Keep it in the margins. You will want it when the math speaks. Patterns hide in the ordinary, and hospitality is a religion of ordinary things. Fresh ice in buckets, towels folded like they have a memory, a front desk smile that makes strangers breathe easier. After that November dinner where my father crowned Patrick with charisma, I went hunting for what the room could not name. It started with linens. Housekeeping reported a count that did not match occupancy, which happens when a family of 5 uses every towel like a small rebellion, but this was different. The numbers were off in a way that repeated always in threes, always on weekends when Patrick liked to sweeten the vibe with friends and influencers who tagged, but did not tip. I pulled 3 months of keycard data and matched it to housekeeping schedules. A master key appeared after midnight on 6 separate nights, each time staying in a suite for fewer minutes than it takes to change a light bulb. The timestamp landed at 2:13 in the morning more than once. That kind of neatness is not human. It is someone trying to make math act like makeup. I asked Lily to help me without telling her the word audit. We cross-referenced minibar sales to vendor drop-offs and found a slope that should have been level. Bottles that arrived did not vanish through invoices. They evaporated through nights without receipts. When I stood behind the bar on a quiet Tuesday, the pour spouts looked innocent, but the line cooks had a story about late closings, and friends of the manager told with the shrugged shoulders of people who want a paycheck more than a feud. I did not scold. I wrote times and first names in a notebook and circled a date Valentine's Day, the day Marcus had marked as a technical breach with the bank. Looking back now, the hotel was telling me a love story with money, it loved attention, and it cheated on discipline. I started spending evenings in the server closet where the air tasted like tin and dust. I watched the property management system the way a night nurse watches monitors quiet, relentless seeing blips as warnings. An old catalog held the door open like a doorstop made of nostalgia, and under a coil of Ethernet cable sat a sticky note with a password that included the word charisma. I could not decide if that was arrogance or laziness, and then realized it did not matter. I replaced the sticky with a sealed envelope addressed to myself and phoned the IT vendor to reset permissions by policy. They balked until I said the phrase compliance standard in a voice that did not invite debate. That envelope would matter later, but I am not spoiling it yet. Memory kept throwing me anchors the 4th of July. I was 14 when a cash drawer came up short and my brother's hand covered the ledger like a magician's scarf returned to me in the glow of the server rack. The smell of toner from the office printer took me back to the night I found a vendor's statement that did not match the checks my father thought he had mailed. Even the sound of the freight elevator, one long groan followed by a click, reminded me that buildings tell the truth if you stop asking people to translate. I walked the fire stairs during quiet hours, counting landings like prayers, and I made a list titled Non-Negotiables Fire Code Compliance. Americans with Disabilities Act, upgrades, panic hardware on the side. Doors that Patrick wanted to keep romantic meaning unsafe. Romance is cheap, liability is expensive. When I confronted Patrick, I chose the only language that could corner him data with dates. We stood in the back office that used to smell like pencil shavings and now smelled like a lemon-scented apology. I laid out linen counts against occupancy keycard logs, against housekeeping minibar inventory, against invoices. He laughed with the casual malice of someone who has never had to fix the mess he leaves. You read spreadsheets like poetry, he said, patting my shoulder as if I were a helpful child. I read people. I kept my face calm. People sign contracts, I said, and contracts speak louder than charisma. He rolled his eyes and called me Ms. Spreadsheet. I wrote the nickname down later because even cruelty deserves a record before it becomes evidence. Marcus and I met at a coffee shop that understood the miracle of hot mugs on cold days. He brought copies of the bank's covenant letter, the aging report for payables, and the calendar that would govern our fate. The bank wanted a plan by Tuesday, April 3rd. There was an unspoken timeline after that letters of default that start polite and end with sheriffs. Marcus did not predict doom. He handed me a ruler and asked if I could measure without lying to myself. Could the hotel survive 3 months of partial closures for renovations? Could we service debt if winter refused to be kind again? Could we pay vendors within 30 days and stop bleeding goodwill? The answer in the honest math was no. Not with the current leadership. Not with numbers that felt like storytelling instead of accounting. I felt a strange steadiness set into my chest, the sort that arrives when denial finally packs a bag. Meanwhile, small humiliations continued their parade. At a menu tasting, Patrick announced he was renaming the signature cocktail after himself. He mocked my concern about rate parity on the booking sites, calling it nerd weather. I let him win the drink name and quietly corrected the rates because a single bad weekend can erase a month of hard work. I kept whispering to myself the phrase that had built my career. Make the room work for the guest, and the guest will work for the room. The guest in this case was not a person. It was time. I needed time more than I needed an apology. So I started buying it. I negotiated with a vendor to re-age invoices in exchange for a renovation contract when the day came. I promised a local artist gallery space in the lobby if he would bid low on murals for the stairwell. I met with a fire marshal off the record and asked what would get us red-tagged without mercy. He listed 3 items. I fixed 2 within a week and documented both. And then a small thing with a loud future happened. Chloe, the new PR intern, fresh from a communications program with a smile like hope, asked me how to spell my full name for a media list. Deborah with an H, I said. Marshall with 2 L's. She typed it, then blushed when Patrick swooped in to take over. Later that night, I saw a draft media kit on a shared drive that listed leadership, Patrick Marshall acting general manager. Thomas Marshall founder. Under founder and chief executive, someone had typed my name, then deleted it, then typed TBD. The track changes told a story in silence. I did not touch it. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder named after weather. You see the pattern, right? Weather changes, so do titles. By the time the calendar stumbled into late winter, I had a neat stack of papers and a neater stack of decisions. I would not rescue another payroll by quiet transfer. I would not argue charisma against compliance in rooms designed to flatter egos. I would build a plan that assumed feelings would not pay a single invoice. The bank's letter on April 3rd would be my doorway. What Patrick and my father did not understand because they had never needed to was that quiet is not surrender. Quiet is a blade you sharpen in the dark, and when the time comes, it does not need to shout. It only needs to cut clean. The letter from the bank arrived on a gray Tuesday, April 3rd, 2023. Formal as a funeral program and twice as cold. It asked politely for a capital plan and a path to compliance with a sentence that translated to, "This prove you can pay or we will find someone who can." I took the envelope to a quiet table at a coffee shop where the lights never flickered and read it 3 times, once as a daughter, once as an operator, and once as a buyer. Olivia slid into the seat across from me with a notebook and eyes that had already chosen courage. "If they want certainty," she said, "give them certainty. And if your family wants a hero, let them audition without you." We sketched a model where my help would no longer be charity. It would be a transaction the bank could bless. The first step was a new name with no family tied to it. By Thursday, a Delaware limited liability company existed with a clean address and a quieter purpose. We called it Harbor North Holdings because the map in my head pointed toward lakes and rescue. Marcus met us in a borrowed conference room that smelled like carpet cleaner and beginnings. He is a man who brings folders the way surgeons bring instruments, necessary, sharp, sterilized of wishful thinking. He laid out the numbers I already knew and the ones he had been too kind to say aloud. Debt service coverage below one vendor, balances aging into the wrong columns, rate parity violations that bled revenue through 1,000 pinholes. He pointed at the calendar. If we signal competence by end of April, he said the bank can slow its trigger. If we show capital and a plan by early May, they can justify a sale rather than a seizure. They prefer deals that do not invite headlines. He told me the truth about appraisals in down markets. They stack conservatism on caution until a property you love looks like a liability on paper. Your advantage, he added, is that you know how to run it. Their advantage is that they do not need your last name. The due diligence began like a heist designed by introverts. I scheduled a vendor consolidation review and requested every maintenance log, every roof inspection, every fire drill report. I highlighted the missing signatures and circled 2 exits where panic hardware had been ordered for months. I walked up the stairwells at dawn, counting every landing and listening for the hiss of pipes that complained before they burst. I called the fire marshal for a hypothetical chat and asked which 3 items would draw a red tag in a heartbeat. We fixed 2 by reallocating cash from a marketing campaign Patrick adored. He fumed. I smiled. The lights stayed on. In the server closet, I replaced the sticky note password with a sealed envelope addressed to myself and had the IT vendor roll access by policy. When Patrick asked why he could not log in with his favorite word anymore, I said, "Because policy is not an insult," and wrote down the time he asked. Evidence likes timestamps. So do judges. Chloe, earnest and bright, became an accidental mirror. She forwarded me a draft press release for an upcoming rebrand that credited Patrick's visionary leadership and called my father the guiding lighthouse. Under executive leadership, my name appeared in track changes, then vanished. I did not correct it. I saved it alongside a screenshot of the media kit where founder and chief executive had been typed, deleted, and replaced with "to be determined." It is a special kind of clarity when people tell you who they are without meaning to. I thanked her for her hard work and asked her to double-check vendor names. She would matter later for reasons no one in that office understood yet. I kept my mother out of the math because love is not a spreadsheet, and I did not want to weaponize her loyalty. She knew I was tired. She thought I was sad. I was neither. I was focused. At night, Olivia and I toured competitor properties and took notes on ADA compliance on the soundproofing of doors. On the way, a front desk offered water before it asked for a card. We built a renovation plan that staged like Theater Act 1 for life safety and accessibility, Act 2 for rooms that bleed revenue when they look tired, Act 3 for the lobby that tells your story the moment cold air follows a guest inside. We priced it line by line and added contingency because adulthood is what happens when you respect the things you cannot control. Harbor North Holdings did not show up in any family conversations. It showed up in a meeting with the bank's workout officer, a woman named Denise, who had the quiet authority of someone who has shepherded dreams through triage. I brought her 3 things: a phased renovation schedule, a management plan with Olivia's name on it, and proof of funds that did not need my father's approval. Marcus spoke banker, which is to say he answered every question with a margin and an exit. We did not insult the appraiser. We used her numbers. Then we offered above them 15 to 30% in a structure that kept the staff employed, cleared vendor balances, and gave my parents a 5-year residence as part of the transfer. Denise read everything without hurry, stopped once at the clause about staff retention and said, "You want goodwill to survive this?" I said yes. She nodded. "Then we will all look like adults." While we waited on responses that moved through towers of glass at the speed of risk, Patrick staged a pep talk in the lobby. He promised a grand reopening with a signature cocktail, a mural, and a vibe you cannot audit. He wore a blue suit too bright for the carpeting and shot a video where he described hospitality as being born with sparkle. My father watched with a smile that belonged to summers when things were simpler. He told me I worried like an accountant. I told him I planned like an owner. He laughed. "Owners have their names on deeds," he said. "You have your name on spreadsheets." I let him have the line. Lines like that look good in a highlight reel. They look better when you cut to the document where the deed says otherwise. By late April, Denise signaled that the bank preferred an orderly sale to a messy fight. She asked for discretion, and I gave her silence that could hold a building. We signed a letter of intent through Harbor North, then a purchase and sale agreement through a special purpose vehicle meant for one task only. I saw the number on the page, 8 figures written out in words, a sum that would have made me dizzy when I was 20 and felt nothing but relief. Not because I wanted a trophy, because buildings do not care about titles. They care about roofs that do not leak and staff that can pay rent. The closing date landed on Memorial Day weekend because calendars are cruel and symbolic. I marked it in my phone with one word tied. What none of them knew, not my brother with his reheated charisma, nor my father with his love of applause that echoes, was that I had already walked the corridors of their imagined future and replaced the light bulbs. The hotel would live. The name on the deed would not match the one in their toasts. And when the sky finally turned the precise blue of a clean start, the only thing louder than my quiet would be the truth printed in black ink. But that comes later. For now, remember that phrase Patrick loved, a vibe you cannot audit. I was going to prove on paper and in public that you absolutely can. Quiet revenge began with ink and silence. Harbor North Holdings, my Delaware company, opened a clean path. One special purpose vehicle, one purchase agreement, one promise to keep every staff member employed, and to grant my parents a 5-year residence. Marcus translated our plan into banker language that felt like oxygen-phased renovations, credible budgets, and leadership that would show up before dawn and after closing. Denise, the bank's workout officer, preferred order to drama. We offered above appraisal between 15 and 30% to spare the city a foreclosure headline and to spare our people a winter of fear. I toured stairwells at Sunrise, priced Panic Hardware, and scheduled American with Disabilities Act upgrades like acts in a play. Patrick kept filming pep talks about charisma. I kept collecting timestamps, emails, and a keycard audit that would later read like a confession written by a computer. "You cannot audit a vibe," he boasted. "Watch me," I whispered, and signed the letter of intent that would carry us to Memorial Day. Fan Sao. The receipts stacked themselves. Chloe, our PR intern with a heart too honest for politics, forwarded a draft media kit where my title flickered, typed in, then deleted, then replaced with "to be determined." I saved both versions. The camera near the server closet caught Patrick at 2:13 in the morning, resetting Wi-Fi with a grin that never reached his eyes. The keycard system recorded a master key tapping doors for minutes too short to clean, too long to be innocent. Marcus compiled a covenant package that could hold up under cross-examination, aging payables, late payments in December and January, a technical breach on Valentine's Day. Olivia rehearsed our grand reopening script with me until the sentences felt like stone calm factual, not 1 decibel louder than necessary. By mid-May, the bank's reply was simple: proceed. The closing date, cruelly symbolic, landed on Saturday of Memorial Day weekend. I marked it with one word tied. The public stage was set with glass brass and a Chicago sky that forgot how to be gray. Cameras, city officials, vendors who had carried us through lean years, everyone in their places. Patrick, in a suit too blue for the carpet, clasped the mic and winked at reporters. When I stepped toward the private elevator, security stopped me. "Per management," one said, almost apologetic, "your access is revoked." My father smiled like a judge and delivered the line that would outlive his pride. "You will never set foot in our resort again." For a heartbeat, my body forgot air, then found it. The gravel outside crunched under my heels as if the building itself cleared its throat. I did not plead. I nodded to Olivia. She handed me the microphone. I turned back to the lobby to the crowd that expected spectacle and gave them something they were not ready for: documentation. "I am Deborah Marshall, founder and chief executive of Elegance Hotels Group," I said the room, refocusing as if someone adjusted a lens. I thanked the city for coming, thanked our staff by name, and then laid out exactly what had happened. The bank sought certainty. Harbor North delivered it. The purchase closed the day before with terms that preserved jobs, paid vendors, and granted my parents a 5-year residence. I referenced the appraisal, the premiums we chose to pay, the renovation schedule approved by fire and building authorities. I did not raise my voice. I did not gloat. I simply held up copies of the deed transfer and the staff retention clause. The lobby murmured. My father blinked hard as if vision itself could be negotiated. Patrick tried the word fraud like it might bite me. Denise, standing with a banker's posture in the back, shook her head once. Reporters found their pens. The cameras found my face. Truth is not loud. It is specific. Security escorted my father and Patrick to their suite to de-escalate, which is hospitality code for, "We will not let you burn down your own house." My phone filled with missed calls that stacked like chips at a table where the dealer only deals facts. We released a measured statement: continuity compliance community. Patrick filed a lawsuit accusing coercion and trickery. It deflated when the bank officer testified to an arm's-length deal, when Marcus produced correspondence showing independent counsel for all parties, and when the keycard logs and hallway camera aligned on the nights no one wanted to discuss. A judge dismissed with brevity that felt like mercy. Vendors who had waited too long finally received payment. Guests posted photos of hallways that no longer flickered. The loudest thing in the building became the sound of doors that sealed properly against the city's wind. We turned the rebrand into a promise kept. Life safety and accessibility first. Rooms that had bled revenue now exhaled. The Sandberg lobby told a better story the moment cold air followed a guest inside. Local art on the walls, coffee that tasted like attention staff who no longer feared the 30th day on an invoice. We acquired 3 nearby distressed properties, not for trophies but for neighbors. Each one reopened with ramped entries, quiet doors, and teams hired from zip codes that used to feel shut out. Lily rose to guest experience manager because steadiness is a leadership style. Olivia ran operations like choreography you do not notice until you are already smiling. I walked stairwells at dawn counting landings because ritual keeps you honest. The numbers improved, but what mattered most was that payroll met itself. Arrogance presented its bill. Patrick's on-camera meltdown followed him like a shadow into interviews he believed he would dominate. References used words like volatile and unteachable. The vendors he had charmed chose silence over second chances. My father, suddenly older, sent a short letter that spoke about weather and pride and carried a half apology folded into advice. When his health failed, I visited with the courtesy we had never learned to share and left with a quieter grief than I expected. In my mother's maiden name, I funded a scholarship for hospitality students who keep buildings, honest kids who think line items are a love language. The first recipients wrote thank you notes in careful cursive. My mother cried and pretended the room was dusty. Standing in that ceremony, I felt something unhook from my spine, the need to be invited. A year later, rain glossed the sidewalk and the lobby smelled like fresh grounds and new paint. Staff badges tapped green. Cameras watched without drama. The server closet ran on policy instead of personality. Marcus joined our audit committee. Chloe, forgiven and promoted, proofed press releases that named people accurately the first time. Olivia and I debated art budgets and picked the pieces that made strangers feel welcome. When I pause at the front desk now, I think about the first index card, where I wrote an amount I could not afford and called it investment. I think about a sentence: my father loved owners have their names on deeds, and how right he was in a way he never intended. To those listening who have been told to smile and step aside, here is the thing: quiet revenge is not spite. It is stewardship. It is contracts that clear their throats in rooms where charisma used to be the only law. When family turns you into a ledger line, write your own column, balance it in daylight, and let the numbers speak for you.